Zararis of Liberty Blue holding it down. Andrew is an adult at actual work and had to go in, so I am holding it down for you guys over the next hour and a half, 2 hours as the news comes in. It's early. We've seen a couple of the transactions of the day come in. Jordan Eberle signing that extension, Tyler Toffoli to the Jets, Pat Maroon to the Bruins. Oh, how I would love to be a fly on the wall seeing what Jack Edwards' reaction was to finding out Pat Maroon was about to become a Boston Bruin. But I have Trade Center, I have Twitter open. If anybody wants to drop in, the comment section is open by all means. There's still a lot to cover. There's a handful of guys. I'm curious to see if anything becomes of them. There are a few guys who haven't been mentioned that in particular, I know as a Ranger fan, I've been looking for a first line right wing for quite a few weeks now. The Jordan Eberle dream that died earlier today. Tyler Toffoli, always kind of a long shot for the Rangers and Devils to make something happen. The names that everybody else has heard is what I've heard too. I've had a few people tell me that Riley Smith, Max Pacioretty, that tier of forward, Frank Vetrano, who I go back and forth on being interested in Frank Vetrano, the player, because we all have very fond memories of that team from 2 years ago. They were a really exciting group that had a lot of things go right for them. And right now, as we sit, Vetrano doesn't solve the Rangers' fundamental issue on that first line right now. That first line is not getting to the offensive zone with possession of the puck often enough. And when they do get to the offensive zone, because that right wing has kind of been a liability this year offensively, whether it's Blake Wheeler, whether it's Capo Caco. And that's not to say Wheeler and Caco didn't have moments where they were effective, but for the most part, those guys are not going to draw defenders to them. They are not going to make the other team's guys worry about them. And that's going to naturally allow the defense to cheat in the direction of Zibanejad, to cheat in the direction of Kreider. Zibanejad is still shooting at one of the lowest rates of his entire career. He's just not putting the puck in the direction of the net. That intel tells me the responsibility of whoever that first line right wing is going to be. They're going to have two roles. Number one, and this is something that's been true of Zibanejad and Kreider for a while, that right winger is going to need to be somebody who can forecheck reasonably well, because when that first line of Kreider and Zibanejad gets in trouble, it's often when they're in transition and they can't gain the offensive zone with speed. If they have to dump the puck in below the other team's goal line, go and get it, pressure, win it, and then set up. Zibanejad and Kreider are not particularly good at that. Though both of them are pretty good skaters and they're able to put pressure on the forecheck, they don't win a lot of those puck battles. They don't engage all that often. So that's one component of what I'd be looking for in a first line right wing. It's part of why earlier in the week, I know it probably wasn't going to happen based on the relationship in Washington, but in a vacuum, Anthony Mantha, big and fast, something the Rangers desperately need. I like Alex Wenberg's addition. We haven't gotten a chance to really talk about that. Andrew had dropped a YouTube short earlier the day of the trade. Wenberg's fine. I'm working on a more of a statistical deep dive to kind of explain the type of player he is. But the thing that jumps out about him, he's not going to put the puck on the net. So the Rangers have themselves another handsome Swedish man who refuses to shoot the puck. Something that really kind of astounded me when I was looking through his numbers. Someone said this to me on Twitter and I wasn't sure if they were right. And then I went and looked it up. He has the lowest rate of chances, individual scoring chances. So he himself took the lowest rate of scoring chances of any forward on the Kraken so far this season. So if you drop him with Kakko and you drop him with Cooley as the third line, we still need to address that first line right wing. If the Rangers do not add a first line right wing, that in my mind is the only way today is an unconditional failure. Other than that, if you bring in anybody, and I know anybody is not exactly a high bar to clear, but if we're talking about guys like Max Pacioretty or Riley Smith, I myself do not I don't like that as the addition, but I can understand what the Rangers are trying to do in adding those type of guys. They're thinking to themselves, if we put this guy in a different environment, we change their usage, we give them complementary players, maybe we can get something more out of them. Pacioretty worries me because he hasn't really stayed healthy in quite a while. I'm pulling up his hockey reference here. Hang on. I don't think Pacioretty's played a real season. And yeah, I mean, 26 games this year with Washington, 5 with Carolina last year, 39 with Vegas the year before that, and then 48 of the 56 games with Vegas in that 56 game season. So there's not really a ton of I don't want to say there's not a ton of upside, but there's not a ton of value there. I don't know if the Rangers add Max Pacioretty to be the first line right wing, that would worry me because I don't know if 2024 Max Pacioretty is both physically capable of and if that's the kind of guy you really want to stake a lot on. I feel that part of the issue the Rangers have right now is, and this is my opinion, I personally feel that the Rangers front office kind of overestimates their guys' own talent. That's not to say Zibanejad, Kreider, Trouba, Trocheck, Panarin. Those guys aren't good. You know, they all have upside in their respective ways. Trocheck and Panarin have been outstanding this year. But when we look at the track record, you know, a lot of the narrative around the Jack Eichel time period, 2021, when that was a possibility for the Rangers, when they were really pushing hard to trade for him, a lot of the narrative was the Rangers want to keep Zibanejad because they feel like Zibanejad is better than Eichel. We all know now that's not the case. But 2 years ago, that was what the Rangers' messaging was to the public. They got that out there for us because they wanted us to think that way. So, with that in mind, that tells me they think they're not that far away, that they don't need the home run. And Jake Gensel would have been the home run. And we'll talk about it more on the show on Monday to go a little bit deeper because I know Andrew has thoughts on this. I know everybody, frankly, has thoughts on the Gensel situation, but the knee jerk reaction is that the Rangers were never really going to be similar to Eichel, actually. The Rangers were never going to seriously be considered as a landing spot for him because the Penguins didn't want to send him to a rival like we are. And I understand Carolina's in the division as well. But the Carolina Pittsburgh beef is not like the Rangers Pittsburgh beef. You know, there's a reason there are still Penguins beat writers 2.5 years later still complaining about the Rangers as a team. And I like a lot of the people in the Pittsburgh media. I know the Pittsburgh media got a bit of a bad rap with the Dubas, with when the Penguins hired Dubas to do everything, that the Wonder Kid, the Golden Boy, and there are a lot of people reveling in the Penguin misery right now. And believe me, I am very happy that the fuckery of Sidney Crosby will not continue for that much longer as a Ranger fan. As a hockey fan, it's very weird to see the Penguins being run like this. I mean, if we're going to talk about this in a vacuum, Capo Caco right now is a better hockey player than Michael Bunting. I know there are probably a couple Leafs fans watching this right now who are going to throw shit at the screen or say, I don't know what I'm talking about. Capo Caco costs like $2 million. Strong play driver at both ends, elite defensive forward. I know the counting stats aren't there, but it's not like Michael Bunting's exactly lighting the league on fire right now. I want to say he has 20 something points, if I remember correctly. He has 36 points in 60 games. Okay, so about 0.55 points per game. That's good. You know, that's a solid NHL player. But Kako, for how much he costs, and you would have 2 more years of team control, whereas Bunting, you know, is about the same age, I want to say, as Jake Gensel. Yeah, Bunting's 28 and Gensel is 27, if I remember correctly. Yeah, Gensel's 29, excuse me. So yeah, we're talking about getting a guy who's 2 years younger than Gensel, who may or may not have a role on what the Penguins are next year. And I know a lot of the discourse around the Penguins has been kind of weird in the last few days. And I really do struggle getting over this from a Rangers fan perspective because it feels like this is the second time in a 2-3 year period where the Rangers have just gotten the thumb from another team because they didn't want to trade with us. You know, I know I personally am still a bit pissed they didn't throw the kitchen sink at the Sabres for Jack Eichel. I know in 2021, amongst Ranger fans at least, there was a real I don't want to trade Lafreniere or Kako for Eichel. I was prepared to trade one of those guys to get Eichel at that point. I was ready to do that. But the Sabres, and I know this was more of an ownership thing than a Kevin Adams thing, but the Sabres essentially told the Rangers to go fuck themselves. And based on that, it feels like a lot of that, we're still dealing with the impact of that now. If you believe the common narrative that the Rangers traded Pavel Buchnevich to the Blues in more or less a salary dump, they thought they were going to get Jack Eichel, and then the Sabres backed out of it, if you believe that narrative. I don't particularly believe that because you would kind of have to be stupid, frankly. And as much as I dislike some of Chris Drury's decisions and his talent evaluation process, I don't think he is a stupid person. I don't think he would trade somebody without having the other trade already agreed to. That would just be negligence. And sure, you could say it was his first time on the job. He was kind of getting his feel for it. Maybe that first offseason is still, the Rangers are really still dealing with the repercussions of that now. And it's quite the struggle. And I see a few people in the chat mentioning that the Rangers are talking about Riley Smith, about Max Pacioretty. So at least the people who have been kind enough to DM me things they've heard, that they're hearing what the people closer to the situation and a bit more plugged in are hearing. So for one, my biggest goal here, the Rangers need to leave today with another right wing. I would argue if you are going to add Max Pacioretty, you should probably try and get Riley Smith as well, based on the prices we're seeing. Tyler Toffoli, who's got 26 goals this year, the leading goal scorer on the Devils, went for a second and a fourth. And I like Tyler Toffoli. I didn't think it was feasible for the Rangers to go out and get him. The Rangers Devils thing is weird. I understand there's egos involved, that type of thing, where you don't trade with that franchise. They're your arch rival, whatever, that type of thing. Toffoli's a good hockey player. If the Rangers had left today with Tyler Toffoli as the first line right wing, I would have been perfectly content with that, especially at that price. Even if it was a little bit more for the Rangers, if it was a second and a third, and I know the Rangers don't have their thirds next year or seconds this year because of other trades they've had to do over the last couple of years, but I, for one, need a right wing upgrade because that's going to have the trickle down impact and make the rest of the lineup better. That's my goal today. I know the Rangers missed out on Gensel. I know Buchnevich is not happening. So that tells me that we need to pivot. If we're going to pivot, that means we need to take more of an all hands on deck type approach. And what I mean by that is when we're talking about everybody pulling in the same direction, we can't have any dead weight. And right now, the Rangers have 2 or 3 guys in their lineup who just aren't great. We still need to see what's up with Jacob Trouba. I know earlier in the week it was reported he was going to be getting evaluated for an injury. We still don't know what that injury is, how long he's going to be out. The Rangers adding Chad Ruhwedel today. I like that trade a lot. I've been asking for a 7th defenseman for a while now, just because it doesn't feel like the Rangers believe in Zach Jones. And the reason I say that is twofold. Number one, whenever Zach Jones has drawn in, he hasn't looked amazing. And I understand a lot of people are kind of tired of, well, if you keep saying this guy is good, eventually he's got to show me something. We've done that with Kakko. We've done that with Lafreniere. We've done that with Keandre Miller. I know people would like to see more from Zach Jones, and I agree with you. It is hard when you are inconsistently drawing into the lineup to stay ready. It's why, in my opinion, I don't think the Rangers think that much of Zach Jones, because if they did, I would argue he would be in Hartford right now playing on their first pair, because Hartford is injured to all hell as well. I remember 2-3 weeks ago, the Rangers and the Wolfpack both only had 6 defensemen at one point. So the Wolfpack had to make a subsequent move to add somebody so they could call someone up to the Rangers and have the requisite depth. I like Ruhwedel. Defense first, solid in his own end. I had a couple different friends of mine who are in the Pittsburgh media and just Penguins fans in general. 2 separate people text me, you'll like Ruhwedel. If he draws in, you won't be nervous. And I think that's something the Rangers really we need. And as individual talents, I like a lot of the pieces on this Rangers defense. I know Ryan Lindgren is having a brutal season, and I'm doing some research and I'm going to put together something long form to kind of dive into why he's struggling so much right now. But in a vacuum, Adam Fox, Keandre Miller, Eric Gustafsson, 3 solid puck movers, above average puck movers, able to clear the zone, defensive zone, without having to alley-oop it out and pray that the guys going off for a change are able to stay off and not worry about losing possession. Where we start getting into questions, Lindgren, his struggles this year, I think, are partly systemic, that Peter Laviolette asks different things of his defensemen, so the responsibilities are different, and he's not well suited. He's not a great puck handler. He's an okay skater. I would say he's about average for an NHL defenseman in today's game. Truba's the ultimate high leverage guy. He loves the big play. He loves making that run like a fullback overlapping in soccer in the offensive zone where he's going to try and drive the net. And on occasion, when he does that, he's going to leave Miller back by himself. We know Miller loves to make that aggressive play in the offensive zone as well because he does have an offensive flair to his game. And then in the neutral zone, Trouba loves to step up and throw that big hit, makes everybody go crazy. It fires the team up. That type of thing is not lost on me. I, as a person, don't particularly care. It's great. A lot of the time when he throws that hit, the Rangers don't win possession of the puck, which is where I'm at on that. But at the very least, I understand why the Rangers value what Trouba does because they don't have a lot of guys who do that. That is important. That does matter. And let's see. You think we get another guy? Do you think Buchnevich is actually going to get traded? So I'll start going through the questions here. Do you think Buchnevich is going to get traded? Off-season move. I really wanted Buchnevich, and this is me not as a Ranger fan, just as like fits, landing spots. I really wanted Buchnevich in Winnipeg because I feel like he's a really strong puck carrier. And if you added him to their top six, it would allow the Rangers. God, I miss Buchnevich on the Rangers. If you added him to the Jets, and you've got him and Nick Ehlers as their puck carriers to transition the puck through the neutral zone and get to offense, you have such a deeper team. When I had Alyssa on early last week to talk about the Jets, that was really something we were both in agreement on, that the Jets needed one more forward, and they're a good team. I like the group Winnipeg has, but it feels like they're missing one more guy in comparison to the other teams out there. I mean, we talk about Dallas, we talk about Colorado, Vegas, Edmonton, Vancouver. I like all of those teams' rosters just a little bit more than Winnipeg. And Winnipeg's good. Do not get me wrong. Josh Morrissey should be getting Norris consideration. Connor Hellebuck is absolutely going to win the Vezina, barring something crazy. I want to thank Isaac saying Brooks says patches to NYR is a real possibility. Yeah, Pacioretty fits everything Chris Drury values in a hockey player, okay? He's American. He's played for the American national team. And if I remember correctly, Pacioretty is also a Connecticut guy. Yeah, he's a New Canaan guy. So yeah, this fits the Jonathan Quick thing. This fits the Blake Wheeler thing of big decorated American chasing a Stanley Cup. For one, I don't know if Max Pacioretty can be your first line right wing and you call yourself a Stanley Cup contender. I own a Max Pacioretty Team USA t-shirt from the World Cup of Hockey in 2016. I like get ready to learn Colony Grill, buddy. Yeah. I Hey, there's a reason the Rangers didn't trade for Wenberg till like 4:00. Pacioretty worries me on twofold. And if the Rangers do end up trading for Pacioretty, I will do some analysis. I'll do a statistical dive on him as well. I'm finishing up the Wenberg one. Lindgren is going to take some time because defensemen are harder to evaluate. So Lindgren I have to do. And Pacioretty, if I remember correctly, hang on, I will pull up all three zones and I will see. They probably don't even have transition stats for Max Pacioretty because he hasn't played in so long. I'm going to pull up the player cards from Corey Schneider's Patreon real quick and see what Max Pacioretty is looking like. But yeah, no, he has, I don't know, let me see the last time he qualified for transition stats. 21, 22. Okay. This is 2 years ago and 2 Achilles injuries ago. Yeah, his transition stats profile is a dump and chase type guy. Max Pacioretty, we all know, I want to say 2-time 40 goal guy in Montreal. No, excuse me. He very much mid-30s, yeah. 39, 37, 30, 35. Granted, those are during the Obama administration. I don't know how much stock you want to put into Max Pacioretty's counting stats from 8-9 years ago, being that he's had 2 Achilles surgeries in the last 2 years. I see Zachary Smith saying Riley Smith. As a Ranger fan, my counterpoint is if we're going to add Pacioretty, get Riley Smith too. Making the money work is the issue there. I do understand that. I don't have their cap hits in front of me, so let's go over to Cap Friendly and see what those guys are working with. Riley Smith, I want to say, is $5 million flat for just the rest of this season. Oh no, Riley Smith is under contract next year. I did not realize he was also under contract next year. That makes Riley Smith a little bit difficult, and Washington can't retain on Pacioretty. So I don't know if there's a world where they could do both, but that's really how I feel about this because both of those guys are kind of dart throws. They're both they are both dart throws. The ability to be a good hockey player is in there for both of them, but you haven't seen it from Riley Smith this season in Pittsburgh, and he's been riding shotgun with Evgeny Malkin, and Malkin's a good player. I know Malkin isn't what he was 5 to 10 years ago. He was one of the best players in the entire world 5, 10 years ago. Now, his counting stats are still decent. He's not as good in transition, which is something that was really underrated about peak Malkin, was his ability to weave the puck through the neutral zone. And because he was so big and strong, retain possession. Riley Smith's transition profile, it's not the prettiest thing in the world. I'm going to pull it up right here and see if I can get screen sharing to work and explain something here. Okay, so let's see. Share screen, player cards, share. Okay. So if you're looking at the screen right now, I always forget if Restream allows you to show the cursor, but if you're looking at this card right now, the way to read it is up and down and left to right. So if you're to the right of the middle, that means you're above average in that statistical category. If you're looking at Riley Smith's offensive stuff, so if you're looking at zone entries, which is towards the bottom here, so you see the defensive one, and then above that, this little one here where it says entries, entry possession, that type of thing. I'm going to make it smaller so this works better. So if you're looking at zone entries, so zone entries per 60 is just the amount of times he gets the puck into the offensive zone. That's just the raw number, not how successful, whatever. If you go a tier below that, controlled entry, still above average, not particularly highly above average, but still above average. So if he's going to have the puck through the neutral zone, he's going to be able to get the puck into the offensive zone, which is good. That's something that Kreider and Zibanejad need as a compliment. And then you go tier below her. This is where it starts to get hairy. When you see entries with a chance, and I'm going to close that for now. Entries with a chance means when when he's gotten into the offensive zone with the Penguins this season, they haven't created chances in the offensive zone at an above average rate. That tells me a couple of things. Number one, it tells me the Riley Smith fit might not have been there, and that was more of a hopeful and a forecast. You could say that about quite a few of the Penguins additions this offseason. I understand Riley Smith. I really like Riley Smith as a concept, but one thing, and I'll bring this up because somebody just replied this to me on Twitter, David Leftcourt, who really, really good on the stats, replied to me. I'd say 2 of 4 of those guys are better than Brett Berard right now. Brett Berard is in Hartford right now. Profiles as a middle six winger, really strong on the forecheck, choppy skater, fast, really kind of pesky, and somebody who I think if the Rangers were a little more desperate, would have gotten a look at some point this year, especially after the Blake Wheeler injury. And that's how I feel about Brennan Othman as well. And I see what Isaac's question. I'll go back to Riley Smith in a second, but on Berard real quick. The thing I like about Berard is he's cheap, he's young, and when you're that type of player, the cheap young guy, as a team that's going into the playoffs, and this is true of Will Cooley as well, you're going to be a little naive. You're going to be a little dumb. And I say this affectionately. The 2021-22 Rangers didn't know how good they had it, frankly, that they were young. They hadn't made the playoffs in quite a while. A lot of the young players on that team had never played in the playoffs before, and they didn't know any better. They didn't think it was going to be that hard. They came back from 3-1 against Pittsburgh, backs against the wall, looking like dead bodies. They got cooked the 2 games out in Pittsburgh. I can still hear the air horn from PPG Paints Arena in these headphones right now, thinking about those games where they got absolutely smoked without Ryan Lindgren. But they dragged themselves off the floor in those games. And then against Carolina, they didn't look great. They were winning games. They were in that series. And things didn't really pick up until Zibanejad got going game 6, game 7 of that series. I, for one, feel that 21-22 team really was their best chance with this specific core because that was the last time everyone was cheap. Zibanejad was only making 6-something million. Adam Fox was on his ELC. The Rangers used all of their cap flexibility in the last 2 seasons. These are your guys. That's why I've been banging the drum over the last month that the guys that are here, Kreider, Zibanejad, Panarin, Trocheck, we can put Lafreniere in that category, but he's still kind of, I still don't know fully what he's going to be. Fox, Truba, I would say Lindgren, and Shesterkin. Whoever you add to that group, especially now that we know they're not getting Jake Gensel, it's going to be on those guys to figure it out. I would like to know where where can the Rangers get more from those guys? All right, this is Riley Smith zone entries. Okay, so I'll go back to Riley Smith in a minute, and if the chatter with Patrick with Zibanejad keeps Zibanejad, God, I'm tired. Excuse me. If the chatter with Riley Smith continues, then we can talk a little bit more about what he profiles as, and I can do some statistical stuff with him. But my last point on that 21-22 last year, this year, I wrote a column midway through, I want to say, the Stanley Cup final in 2022 when Colorado was playing Tampa, that this is probably the Rangers' best chance with this specific group for a couple of seasons, just because so many things went their way. I know a lot of people will say you need luck to go your way to make a Stanley Cup, and they're right. Every good team has luck to a degree on the way to winning a championship. You can't win a championship without some things going your way, especially in hockey, where these playoff games that are so low scoring, so intense, high intensity, with those types of games where we're talking about one, two, three, a handful of plays over the course of an entire series, defining what your season is, and you get it all to break your way. The example I'll give you, big picture, think about the Bruins last year. Best regular season team of all time in the 82 game format, 130 plus standings points, Vezina Trophy winning goaltender, one of the best top nines of the salary cap era. Great team, truly great regular season team. They lose 3 games in overtime to Florida and they're out. If you flip a coin 3 times, the odds of it coming up the same on all 3 are not great. You know, you do the math, you do a half times a half times a half, and you get your percentages of that happening. It's not that likely. And then we go back to 2021, where we talk about the Rangers coming back from 3-1 down against Pittsburgh and coming back from 3-2 against Carolina. The odds of you coming back and winning all those games with no margin for error is not great, but they made it happen. When you are getting lucky, you yourself as a good team can influence luck. And I know there are people within the analytics community, the stats community, and I'm one of those people. I generally defer to the statistics, but when we're talking about a small sample, we are talking about 7 games over 2 weeks. There are a lot of talented players in this league. In an ideal world, your talented players are able to swing those 1, 2, 3 sequences that ultimately determine the game. The Rangers' best players are Panarin, Fox, and Shesterkin. When we're talking about Shesterkin in a playoff series, there's nobody I would take before him. I'm going to be honest with you. Based on what we've seen from him, when shit is bad and it is against the wall, and the Rangers are hanging on for dear life, it's not quite the same fire coming out of his eyes as Henrik Lundqvist, where no matter what, going into a playoff game, I felt fine because if they scored at least 3 goals, they were probably going to win. It's not quite that with Shesterkin, but it's pretty close, man. The stat I used to kind of quantify how good Shesterkin was. Shesterkin last season in 7 games against the Devils had a higher goals saved above expected than every goalie in the playoffs but 2. The 2 goalies were Aiden Hill and Sergei Bobrovsky, the goalies who went to the Cup final. We're talking about guys who played upwards of 20 plus playoff games, being the only guys who saved more goals saved above expected than than Shesterkin did against the Devils. Shesterkin, when he is locked in, easily can go with anybody. Fox is the best, second or third best, depending on what you prioritize with your defense. You know, if you prioritize offense, you would probably say Cale Makar. I know Cale Makar is not having a great season this year, and he's kind of I won't say Cale Makar's taken a step back. He's still going to be a top 5 Norris guy, but not as dominant as last year. And we talk about Fox, pretty well rounded. I would say his defense probably leaves you a little bit to be desired. And then I would say McAvoy is probably the best defensive defenseman of that ilk. And Quinn Hughes has been nothing short of remarkable. So I would put Fox right there in that tier with the best defenseman in the world. I'll put Miro Heiskanen in the conversation, but Heiskanen's probably a notch below those guys. Not a knock on Heiskanen. It's just those other guys are better. And then Panarin, I go back and forth on how I feel about. We have seen him at times be a force of nature. That 2019-2020 season, his first year as a Ranger, where the Rangers were the maximum chaos team. The Rangers that season played at one of the fastest tempos in the entire league. They conceded an ungodly amount of chances against because they were not good at defense. But for the sake of that, the trade-off was we are going to play offense at a breakneck pace. We are going to transition. We are going to be the most dominant rush offense in the league. And they were top 10 in terms of chances per 60 because they played at such a high rate. Part of that was having three defensemen littered throughout the lineup in Fox, Trouba, and yes, Tony DeAngelo. Those three guys being able to be sprinkled throughout all three pairs, really play at a high tempo. And that's why Zibanejad was so good offensively that year. And that's why Panarin was so good that year. They played at a really high pace where they got a ton of volume and they got some dangerous chances. And now the Rangers are playing slower. They've gotten slower as a team. Guys get older. As they get older, they slow down. It's why counting stats will typically tick up as you get older, but underlying value won't. Underlying value, a lot of it is tied to defensive metrics. And as you get older, your defense typically wanes because you have to start picking and choosing your spots, conserving your energy, that type of thing. I know everybody who's a basketball fan makes the joke about if LeBron wanted to, he could be the best perimeter defender in basketball, but he chooses not to because he needs that energy on offense now. It's true. As these guys get older, their defense needs to. Oh God, why on earth are they going for Jake Allen? That's a good question. Why would the Rangers be looking at a third goalie? Unless somebody's getting. Oh, that's the Devils looking at Jake Allen. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. I was a little worried there for a second. Jake Allen is probably cheap, if I had to guess. That's why the Devils are looking at him. And it's a stopgap. It's a we're sorry. I think, in all honesty, the Devils trading for Jake Allen is Fitzgerald's way of saying sorry to the guys on that team for not firing Lindy Ruff sooner. That I understand. That as a gesture, that makes sense to me. For actual hockey, I've talked about this a lot over the last week or two, but the Timo Meier piece I wrote for my Substack last week, the Devils had about, I want to say 22 or 23 games left at that point, and they needed to win 17 of those 23 games to finish with exactly 94 standings points. They've lost a couple of games since then. Ruff got fired. The Devils are going to need to win something in the ballpark of 16 or 17 of their final. I'm going to pull up NHL.com and look at the standings real quick, but I want to say it's something in the neighborhood of 17 games. Yeah, the Devils are at 63 games. They have 19 games to go. They're probably going to need to win around 16 of those games if they genuinely want to make the playoffs. 16 wins in their final 19, 32, 66, and 32. That would put them at 98. That would definitely get them in based on what's going on around them. But if we want to be conservative, probably 12 of their final 19, 13 of their final 19. And that's still, 13 by 2 is 26, 26 and 66. That's 92. You probably need to win at least 14, and that's to get to 94, which is the absolute bare minimum they could get. If you want to make the playoffs in the East this year, it's a little bit different because the Metro is kind of bad once you get past the Rangers and the Hurricanes. The Islanders are coming on strong. I talked to known Twitter user Rat Martin earlier in the week about the Islanders, their resurgence under Waugh. They murdered the Sharks last night. I stayed up to watch that because I'm sick in the head and the Rangers weren't playing. But the Islanders are a interesting team in that their upside is really high. Because if Sorokin gets going, he's one of the handful of guys who he can genuinely stand in the crease down at the other end of the ring from Igor, and they could be there all night. That is one of the few guys in the league who genuinely can be the brick wall to shut things down. New Elliot Friedman tweet. Jake Allen will go to the New Jersey Devils for a conditional third. Games played will make it a second. Okay. Of the final 19 games the Devils have remaining, Jake Allen will probably play 12 of those games, and they can bump Dawes' time down. I know poor Nico Dawes, poor Sam Erson of the Flyers, those poor guys have played an ungodly amount of games as young as they are. The days of the workhorse goalie, the 65, 70 start guy, that's not a thing anymore. It's really not a thing anymore. And as a young guy, you can really get burned out. I know it happens. A lot of teams aren't willing to stake their future on one of those young guys. I mean, we talked about it a lot earlier in the season on the show on Liberty Blue, that the Sabres staked a lot on Devin Levy being ready to make the leap, and he wasn't. And that's not a knock on the kid. He went from playing 40 games. That was the high end. In college hockey, you play 2 or 3 games a week. They're mostly on the weekends to not interfere with school. I know they're Division I athletes, and school is kind of secondary to them, especially for guys like that who are drafted, but you're playing upwards of 40 games over a short period of time. That's very different from playing 82 games. If you're a goalie in today's game, you probably want to be in that 60 game mark, ideally, if you're a true 1A goalie, a true number 1 goalie. So as far as the Devils, and we can wrap this up and we'll circle back around to the Rangers, we could talk more about Riley Smith. The Devils are a good example of what happens when you're not quite sure where you want to go. I liked a lot of the decisions they made, getting assets for Damon Severson, letting Graves walk. And I know this is a hot take amongst the Devils fans. I've definitely had a few people come back at me and say, well, how could the Devils be missing Graves and Severson? They're not that good, blah, blah, blah. It's not that they're great players. I've seen the lowlights. I'm very familiar with the Damon Severson controller unplugged defense. I've watched a lot of Devils hockey over the years as a guy who lives in the tri-state area, who can go to Devils games, who watches them on TV when the Rangers aren't on. I like Severson as a third pair guy with a little bit of offense to his game. But the thing they lost, the Devils, they lost the institutional knowledge, and that's not a knock on Hughes. That's not a knock on Nemec. I like both of those guys. I think Nemec is really good already, and he's a kid. I think Luke Hughes, with time, will morph into what the Devils want him to be. But there's no planet where a 20-year-old who was playing college hockey last year should be leading your team in time on ice. So, and I understand it's injuries. I really do. Dougie Hamilton not being able to stay healthy has hurt the Devils a lot. 2 years ago, that Devils team was not bad. It's just they couldn't get a save, and Dougie Hamilton missed a ton of time. Last year, Dougie stays healthy. They get above average goaltending with Vanacek. Vanacek becomes the first Devil since Marty Brodeur to win 40 games in a season. They're really good. They're really good last year. This year, they can't buy a save. They go Schmidt, Dawes, Vanacek. They're going to get Jake Allen in the mix, and they are an interesting case. I'm very curious to see what they do this summer. I think that's a team that's still relatively well positioned to be competitive if they can get an answer to that goalie question. And I will talk about the Flames at some point as somebody who also does do a Flames podcast. I know if you're only familiar with Liberty Blue, yes, I also do a Flames podcast. That's every day. Locked On Flames. My co-host Jess Belmosto is at work. I'm figuring out what we're going to talk about on that podcast as soon as I'm done recording this. Excuse me while I take a sip of water here, because I've been talking nonstop for 45 minutes now, and God, am I tired. All right, that was really needed. God. As far as looking at back towards the Rangers, talking about Riley Smith, Pacioretty, those are both complementary, supporting, auxiliary, ancillary, whatever thesaurus word you want to use. If you add Riley Smith to Kreider and Zibanejad in a vacuum, that is better than the current situation because of the playmaking ability and the potential. Riley Smith, at times, has been a really good hockey player. I'm going to pull up his hockey reference right now. At times, Riley Smith has been a really good hockey player. Where is it? Here we go. No, that's his cap friendly. Excuse me. Here we go. So looking at his counting stats, 29 points, 55 games. That's nothing remarkable. We've talked a lot about how his usage in Pittsburgh hasn't been great, that he didn't really gel with Malkin, but you got to look at a few things. Number one, the time on ice is down, and I got to pull up the time on ice power play. NHL power play stats. I'm talking out loud as I type here so I don't mess up and lose my train of thought. I'm very good at multitasking, but every now and then I will mess up because there's just a lot going on in my head at times. NHL power play, ice time, hockey reference. But when we're talking about skater time on ice, yeah, here we go. This is 2022, 24. Okay. So Riley Smith down about 45 seconds playing. I want to say he's one of their more common forwards. I got to pull up their hockey viz, but you're getting a real good detailed perception into how my brain works right now because I'm trying to evaluate a player in real time. Pulling up Riley Smith's player usage, he's I want to say middle of the pack. I want to say he's probably their fourth or fifth most commonly used forward at 5-on-5. Share screen. Where here we go. Okay, so you're looking at this visual here. This is hockeyviz.com, another resource that's really good in evaluating, just a useful resource in understanding certain components of hockey. So you're looking at this chart here. Gensel, their most common, Crosby, Brian Rust, Ricard Raquel, Evgeny Malkin, and then this light pink line here, Riley Smith. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're sixth most commonly used forward. And then we're going to go over to here. We're going to go to share screen. We're going to go to skater time on ice. So this is how on Hockey Reference you can look up power play time. So we're going to search by power play time on ice. We're going to do Command F, Riley Smith. Riley Smith, a minute 53 power play time per game. That's on average. Of course, there are ebbs and flows with that. But for a perspective, if we were to compare that to someone on the Rangers, let's look at somebody who's on their second power play for say. Capo Caco, a minute 17, second power play. Alexis Lafreniere, a minute 22 per game. So he's getting more power play time than those guys. But let's compare that to, say, Brian Rust, who, if we Command F, Brian Rust, about 40 seconds more. Not 40 seconds more, a couple seconds more. But you get my point here. A slight tick down from those guys in terms of their usage. When you are a counting stats type player, you need that power play time. And that's not a knock. Sometimes you need power play time to generate offense because power play time is more conducive. That's the entire point. I know a lot of people will ding Zibanejad and Kreider as power play merchants, but you need to score on your man advantages. And we'll talk a bit more about the Rangers once we get closer to the deadline itself and we understand who they're going to add, and then we can talk about roster composition and that type of thing. Eric Johnson from the Sabres to the Flyers. That's very interesting. So that's similar to Jake Allen. Adding Eric Johnson to the Flyers is a gesture of good faith. It's not, the Flyers traded Walker to, it was Sean Walker, right? Sean Walker Avalanche, right? Yes, the Flyers traded Sean Walker to the Avalanche, but because they're in the mix for a playoff spot, that's Danny Briere saying to his guys, I know we got rid of somebody who was helping us. I'm sorry. We had to do what's right for the team. But this is a veteran. This is somebody who's won a Stanley Cup. And it's not about this year for the Flyers, which I know is hard for some people to come to terms with, but you have to, at some point, take your medicine. I talked about this really in depth yesterday with Jess on Locked On Flames. At some point, you are going to have to take your medicine. You are going to have to be bad. The Penguins waited as long as they conceivably could. Now they're going to have to start selling off pieces from their team. At this point, Sidney Crosby is still a top 20 player in the entire NHL. I have no hesitation, no reservations in saying that. Evgeny Malkin is probably a top 60, 70 player in the entire NHL. And then Letang, top 40, 30 defenseman. Erik Karlsson, probably about the same thing. But around that, the components of a great team, they're just not there. As I pull up Daily Faceoff and look at some of their bottom six guys, it's just the only one of the bottom six gambles that's really worked for Pittsburgh this year is Lars Eller. They brought in Jesse Puljujarvi on the PTO, which I didn't mind. Puljujarvi, there are far worse players you can put in your bottom six than Puljujarvi. Bemstrom only got called up recently. Jansen Harkins is a nothing burger. Noah Lachari's a nothing burger. And Jeff Carter, there were Penguins fans who were ready to shoot Jeff Carter out of a slingshot last year, how bad he was. So I understand that Pittsburgh really they botched this. there was a means for the Penguins to kind of gradually go out of contention, and they kind of messed up all of their sliding doors moments over the last couple years. I know it's a team that hasn't won a playoff series since 2018, 2017, if I remember correctly. It's been quite a while for them since they've really kind of had the right recipe. Yeah, so second round, first round, qualifying. Yeah, 2017, 2018, when they lost in the second round to the Capitals, who went on to win the Stanley Cup that year. That's really where we're at as far as the Penguins. They lost to the Islanders in 2019. They lost in the bubble to Montreal, I want to say, if I remember correctly, in the qualifying round, because Carey Price got really hot, if I remember correctly. Yeah, it was Montreal. Carey Price did get hot. That's right. And then Montreal lost to the Flyers. Right. And then they lost to the Rangers. And then they lost to the Rangers. No, they lost to the Islanders again, and then the Rangers, and then they didn't make the playoffs last year. Yes. So Pittsburgh had opportunities here to gradually build themselves down and kind of unwind their position, to use stock parlance. I rewatched The Big Short a few weeks ago, so that's really been in the back of my mind. The scene of oh god, I really almost just called Steve Carell Michael Scott. That's embarrassing. That's really embarrassing. But yeah, Steve Carell sitting at the coffee table, looking back and forth while Jeremy Strong is on the other end. A lot of people forget Jeremy Strong is in oh god, The Big Short. My brain is fried. I was up late watching the Islanders play the Sharks, excuse me. But I see Zachary Smith saying this is breaking my heart. Yeah, the Penguins, they went out sad, but on the counterpoint, you won 3 cups. You got 2 of the 100 best players in the history of the sport. Letang is probably going to end up in the Hall of Fame. Erik Karlsson, it'll have Pittsburgh on his team list when he is in the Hall of Fame. Those are that you get Marc-Andre Fleury in the Hall of Fame, even though my particular beef with Marc-Andre Fleury, Marc-Andre Fleury's a good player who's been on a lot of great teams. So Pittsburgh's now unwinding. And I forgot who made this point. It might have been Adam Gretz. It might have been somebody else in the Pittsburgh media. I forget. But they said the thing they found interesting was that Pittsburgh and Washington have ended up in pretty much the same exact spot, but they got there vastly different ways as teams. Pittsburgh's best players are still good. Malkin, Letang, Crosby, etc. Those guys are still all pretty good hockey players. Washington, Backstrom, he might never play again. Ovechkin very clearly kind of hit a physical wall this year. He's still going to keep chasing the goal scoring record. I hope he keeps playing till he gets it, even if he's like 48 and he's still playing like 9 minutes a game, just cherry picking. I hope it happens for him. But they got to the same exact spot, and Washington has managed the ancillary pieces around their stars relatively well. They didn't do a whole lot to mitigate their stars fall off, but they've taken interesting gambles. I really love Dylan Strome as an ad for the Rangers 2 years ago. My Dylan Strome love affair is a lot less serious than it was 2 years ago, because Vinny Trocheck has been great this year. Like, I was very skeptical of the Trocheck signing because of the term, because of how he plays. I didn't think it would age well, and it still may not age well, but this year he has fully validated that contract. But 2 years ago, I really wanted Dylan Strome as the gamble play, because if you sign somebody like him, who only signed for I think $3 million that year with Washington, you could have added more in that summer. You could have gotten, the Evan Rodriguez, who another guy I really wanted the Rangers to target, who's in Florida now, who does a really good job of being big and fast and being a pain in the ass, which is something the Rangers just don't have a whole lot of. But looking at Washington, Dylan Strome, Sonny Milano, and then they're young guys, Hendrix Lapierre finally getting real ice time, Connor McMichael, the Protoss brother that's not in Boston. Their defense, I liked the gamble on Rasmus Sandin last year. I think Sandin is probably a second pair guy on a good team, but he's a useful hockey player. But Pittsburgh and Washington are more or less in the same boat now. They're both on the outside looking into the playoff hunt. Pittsburgh stars are giving them everything they've got. Washington supporting cast. We've been talking about Washington for 5 minutes. I haven't mentioned Charlie Lindgren once. Charlie Lindgren was having a Vezina caliber season the first half of the season. I'm going to look at where he's at now on the goals saved above expected leaderboards, just as kind of a barometer. But Charlie Lindgren out of nowhere having a pretty strong season. Where is Charlie Lindgren? Charlie Lindgren is 23rd in goals saved above expected, which is still of the guys who have gotten into games, there's usually upwards of 80, 90 goalies. To be 20 somethings as a guy who never really did anything, like I want to say Charlie Lindgren doesn't even have a ton of NHL games played. He might be, I want to say, under 200 if I remember correctly. Yeah, Charlie Lindgren has 91 career games, 31 of them coming into this season. That's a real testament to the Capitals' ability to find supporting cast guys. Because, and I jokingly talked about this with one of my friends when I saw her earlier, last year, actually, when I saw her, we were talking about how the Capitals, their only job is to get Ovechkin the goal scoring record now. It is just to make that supporting cast as conducive to that as possible. And whatever happens, happens. They got their cup. They got one of the 100 greatest players of all time. Backstrom's going to have a reasonable case to be a Hall of Famer. They got to the other end of the spectrum. They did their jobs. Everybody got a ring. They took care of their guys too. You know, Tom Wilson got the really expensive extension. That was a reward. They drafted Tom Wilson. They brought him along, started out in the lineup as a fourth line, totally just a total goon. And now, you know, he never stays healthy, but when he is healthy, he is sometimes a good hockey player, which I didn't see happening, all things considered, based on what he was when he first came up as an 18-year-old. God, there's nothing better than a cold sip of water. That's my hottest take. Water's the best drink. It really, really does have a way of hitting the spot. But circling back around to the Rangers, the thing I am most curious about, I need to know what didn't happen. We always hear about the Rangers being close on guys, or they were really in on someone, or they came in late, or they were trying to make shenanigans happen to be able to bring them in. The one I always go back to, and I need to look up the off season it happened. It might have been, 2018, 2017. Steven Stamkos, he signed this 2016. So the summer of 2016, the Rangers are up against the cap ceiling. The day of July 1st, the day free agency opens. July 1st, everybody knows what July 1st is. The day free agency opens. We're sitting there. I'm watching Trade Center. If I remember correctly, I want to say I was at a friend's house and we were watching Trade Center in the living room, drinking shitty beer, looking at each other. And Bob McKenzie, this is how long ago this was. Bob McKenzie was still on the TSN panel full time. Bob McKenzie leans forward in his chair and says, "Ooh, excuse me, I bought my headphones." He leans forward in his chair and says, "Don't count out the Rangers on Steven Stamkos." And I looked at my friend and said, "We have no money. Where are we getting Steven Stamkos?" And McKenzie says, "The Rangers are willing to move stuff around to make it happen." And okay, I'm at least interested. I'm curious. Of course, that didn't happen. He stayed in Tampa. And this is a classic case of if you link anybody to the Rangers, you will both get engagement and that player can ask for a couple $1 million more because agents know the Rangers are willing to overpay for guys. Right now, we're operating under the assumption that they actually did try for Alex Tuch earlier in the week, according to Emily Kaplan. And Emily Kaplan, I genuinely think does a pretty good job for ESPN. She gets scoops on occasion. For whatever reason, she's been pretty good about getting Ranger stuff, which I find weird because national people generally aren't great when it comes to getting Ranger stuff. It feels like the Post used to get all the scoops. Like I remember Molly broke the Trocheck signing, if I remember correctly. Generally, it's either the team itself announces the transaction or it's Larry or it's Molly. Every now and then someone else gets one, but it really does generally feel like those two are the ones. And if they really were in on Tuch earlier in the week, that tells me there was another move. If Tuch was really what they were looking at earlier in the week, that tells me they had a vision for kind of tweaking the roster. Because if you bring in Tuch, if you bring in Riley Smith, if you bring in Buchnevich, all of those guys have at least one more year of contract, if not more than that. In the case of Tuch has 2. Any of those guys you bring in, they are going to have to move stuff around in the summer. It feels like Barclay Goodrow's days as a Ranger are numbered. You will not hear any tears from me that Barclay Goodrow will probably not be a Ranger after this season. I understand why they brought him in. He was a textbook case of, I need to give my team credibility. This guy is coming off of winning 2 Stanley Cups. He plays the game with intensity. He plays the game in the fundamental way that the old school hockey guys think it should be played. I understand why they brought him in. I don't think it did anything. That was ultimately the issue at hand here. I didn't think he was particularly effective at what they wanted him to do. The Rangers fundamentally miss Andrew Peeke to Boston. Kent Johnston underwent successful surgery for the Blue Jackets. Okay. But circling back, the Rangers and talk, the Rangers, Riley Smith, Buchnevich, all of those types of moves would be conditioned on something this summer. The Rangers need to take care of their books. They're going to have more flexibility this year if Gary's forecast is correct. And on occasion, it is. The NHL is also very guilty of over forecasting their revenues because they want to sound good to their owners. But if they're correct, we can estimate the salary cap will be in the neighborhood of 88 and a half, 89. Maybe if everything goes great and the playoffs make extra money, like the Rangers, the Leafs, if a big market team goes on a long run, maybe we can sniff 90. Then, okay, maybe the Rangers don't have to do a whole lot. But when you look at the Rangers books, there are some real red flags that they're going to have to address this offseason. And I'm going to pull up Cap Friendly right now if it'll load. There we go. Okay. So looking at the Rangers cap situation, first we should start here at the top. No second round pick because they traded that for Wenberg. No third round pick because they had to do that in a salary dump. No second round pick because they had to salary dump. And then this third round pick is conditional based on what they do with Wenberg. No, that's not conditional with Wenberg. 28th of that's. Oh, yeah, that's the Patrick Kane one. Okay, that makes sense. I forgot which pick goes with what because there's Patrick Kane and then there's the Patrick Nemeth salary dumps. So they don't have a lot of draft picks in the first 3 rounds over the next couple of seasons, which is an issue. But then again, those draft picks aren't that valuable when you're trying to win the Stanley Cup. So looking at the Rangers books, when you look at their cap friendly situation, and I'm not going to bullshit you. I was falling asleep last night. I was in my bed. I closed my eyes. And in my head, I was hallucinating. I wasn't dreaming yet because I wasn't asleep. I was hallucinating this exact screen. In my head, I kept trying to click on Mika Zibanejad's contract. I kept trying to click on Mika Zibanejad's name. And every time I clicked, it wouldn't go through to the next page. And I kept trying to, why isn't it loading? Why isn't it loading? And then I blinked like 3 or 4 times really quick to realize I was hallucinating and then fell asleep a few minutes later. So that's how deep trade deadline week goes for me. As far as their books, you look at some of these deals, they're getting surplus value on Panarin. They're getting surplus value on Trocheck and Kreider. They're getting surplus value on Lafreniere, surplus value on Fox, surplus value on K-Andre Miller, surplus value on Braden Schneider, surplus value on Sturkin. The issue we have here, and yes, you did see that. That was, they still have the Brad Richards buyout history on this page, which is very funny. So as far as where the Rangers are at, they're going to have real decisions to make. Kakko's restricted free agency. In an ideal world, they take care of business. He shouldn't be that expensive. He has, as many people have kindly pointed out when we've talked about the Rangers maybe using Kakko as a, oh God, that's so disappointing that they stopped the TSN feed and now we're going to be subjected to John Butchergross. Oh, that's so disappointing. I'm sorry. Back to the Rangers cap situation at hand. Looking at their page, the things that really jump out are Kakko's restricted free agency and Ryan Lindgren's restricted free agency. Those are your real fulcrum points. And then Gaudreau, just for posterity here, modified no trade, 15 teams, 3.6 million. The Rangers are going to probably have to pay a draft pick, if not 2, to make that contract go away. It's unfortunate, but that's the reality. I know there's a real case to just buy him out, and the situation is probably a lot better for the Rangers going forward if they were to do that, to buy him out as opposed to salary dumping him like they did Patrick Nemeth to make his money go away. But if you bring in a Tuch, Buchnevich, Riley Smith, Gaudreau is almost assuredly a goner. I think the biggest decision the Rangers have to make this offseason, it's Ryan Lindgren. The analytics community has long pointed out that Ryan Lindgren's mileage is rough. We are talking about a truck with a whole lot of miles on the used car lot. And don't get me wrong, it really was a great truck for a while. He really did used to have strong defensive impacts. He really used to be pretty good at suppressing scoring chances against. That was always the argument for playing him with Jacob Trouba, that Jacob Trouba tries to be an offensive defenseman, even though he's not particularly good at it. So you need to give him a shot suppressing defensive partner who's going to prevent the other team from putting the puck on the net. He's not suppressing chances against right now. That's part of why Adam Fox doesn't look as good as he has in the past. I know Fox's numbers are fine. His underlyings are still good, which tells you this is a Lindgren thing, not a Fox thing. Excuse me here. I'm going to take another sip because, as I said, a lot of talking in the last hour. But as far as Lindgren, as far as Fox, if you are going to seriously keep pushing in with the Fox, Panarin, Trocheck, Kreider, Trouba group of guys, I think there's oh God, I just looked over at the ESPN feed and I saw Ryan Callahan, and God, that makes me feel so old. I remember when Ryan Callahan was wearing 48 as a call up from Hartford. If I remember correctly, it was 48. It was either 48 or 54. 43, excuse me. I was close. Half of three. To quote Chris Tanev, 3 is half of 8, I think is what he said. So yeah. I really do feel old seeing Ryan Callahan on this. Hell, Kevin Weeks being on this panel for Rangers and Devils legend Kevin Weeks. So, but for Lindgren, if the Rangers are going to keep pushing in with their current group, with Trocheck, with Panarin, with Zibanejad, with Kreider, there's a strong case you got to trade Lindgren. You bump K'Andre up, and then if Zach Jones doesn't get traded in the next 50 minutes, Zach Jones is your 3D, and you either sit Gustafsson down and ask him if he's willing to roll the dice. And yes, Sarah, I see we're stuck with Buchagras. It's unfortunate. ESPN has good hockey people, which is what's disappointing. Emily Kaplan is genuinely she's a good presence on television, and she's a good reporter. I love Bob Wischusen. Bob Wischusen, for me, is the best national hockey play-by-play guy in the game right now. John Forsland isn't in the mix for the national games anymore, except on the West Coast. And then when Brian Burke does the second broadcast for TNT, Kenny Albert for football is good. I don't enjoy him as a hockey broadcaster. He talks too much, and him and Eddie Olczyk have too many inside jokes for me. Like, oh, dinner was great last night with blah, blah, blah. I don't care you went out to dinner with the GM of the team. That's great. Unless he told you something, it doesn't matter. That's why I love Wischusen. And the thing I love about Wischusen, and he called the Devils game last night on the Timo Meier hat-trick goal. He screams he screams Nico Timo Meier hat-trick, and then he's dead silent for like 10, 15 seconds and just lets the crowd noise fill it in. That is my single biggest pet peeve of play-by-play guys in today's game. They don't let the game breathe. The crowd is part of your soundtrack as a broadcaster, and it is your responsibility as a broadcaster to know when to let the crowd speak for the moment, because the crowd is always going to be better than what you can say. The moment, and not to get too inside baseball here, but I love talking about this stuff. I mean, I still think about Tony Romo yelling over the end of the Super Bowl. Mecole Hardman having that moment, and I forget what Nance's call was, something to the effect of, I want to say Nance's call was something to the effect of Kansas City hits the jackpot or whatever, and Tony Romo's just screaming about Mecole Hardman when the moment was about the game, and that's a lost art, and it's why I love Wischusen so much. Wischusen genuinely understands the moment, and he lets the moment speak for itself at times, where other guys, they just talk too much, and it's a lost art. But God, did I get lost in the weeds there. I love talking about this shit, as you can obviously tell, as we're going on an hour plus of me doing this. But the thing is, when it comes to who the Rangers add, when we're talking, and yes, Sarah, I did see that call of Gary Thorne calling his grandson's hockey game. That was really cool. As far as the Rangers, as we look at this last 50-minute stretch, I'm going to close out of Trade Center on ESPN because they haven't updated anything in a while. I don't know if I see anything for the Rangers. Keep building. Ryan Lindgren. Oh, just a waiver claim. Okay. Just wanted to check. But thinking about the Rangers, if they don't leave today with at least one more forward, it is a failure. If they add a forward, depending on what it costs, it's probably not a failure. If you are a Ranger fan and you are disappointed they did not acquire Jake Gensel, I'm with you. When they said the Rangers were seriously in on Jake Gensel, and I think that was Emily Kaplan's reporting who started that conversation on Monday or Tuesday, I was all in. I was ready to trade Othman. I was ready to trade. I've had a lot of Penguins fans and Pittsburgh media people text me over the last few days. Would you give up Perreault? Would you give up Perreault? Would you give up Perreault? And I've gone back and forth on it. And for Jake Gensel, I probably think I would have, with the sole point being he is going to play in college again next year. If he came out after college next season, you don't know what your team looks like at that point in the season. You don't know what the Eastern Conference looks like the rest of the season. Right now, I don't even feel that strongly about this group from a what we've seen so far perspective. The reason I feel so strongly about the team as far as like ceiling, they haven't had a functional first line basically all season. Their bottom six gives the Rangers minimal offense. I know VZ and Will Cooley have given the Rangers some offense. I think Cooley has 11 or 12 goals, something to that effect. Where's Will Cooley? Will Cooley's given them 11. Jimmy VZ's giving them 12. Blake Wheeler's given them 9. But outside of the top six, you're not getting anything. Panarin 35, Trocheck 22, Zibanejad 30. No, Kreider 31, Trocheck 22, Zibanejad 19, Lafreniere 18. And then the drop off after that is really stark. Jimmy VZ 12, Cooley 11, Wheeler 9. Wheeler probably, if he comes back, isn't coming back till late April, maybe mid-May. And that's if everything goes really well. And then the drop off gets crazy. You're talking about Brodzinski with 4, Edstrom 2, Gaudreau 1, Nick Bonino, who's not on the team anymore, 1, Pitlick 1, and Rempe 1. I don't think Rempe and Edstrom probably should be on the team past the deadline. And that's not a knock on those guys. It's just very clear the coaching staff doesn't trust them to actually play a whole lot. We're talking about 3 weeks, a month into both those guys being on the team. And Edstrom's average ice time per game is 8:25 and Rempe's is 5 minutes. Like, regardless of the fighting, the hitting, whatever, if the coach only feels like he can play you 5 minutes a game, and I know that's a little bit jacked up, because of the Devils game where he only played like 13 seconds, but best case, he's probably closer to 6 minutes as opposed to 5. I just don't know if you can keep both those guys in the lineup if the coach isn't going to play them. And when we had Matt Albert on the show on Tuesday, Matt's got a background. He's worked for a couple different sports gambling places. When we talked about the goal for the deadline for the Rangers, it wasn't necessarily to get the best player available, even though ideally that would have been nice. I really would like, if we have Jake Gensel on the Rangers, that's a very different conversation than the way I feel right now. But as far as, I'm refreshing Twitter, hang on, notifications. I don't see anything. Okay. But as far as the team, the Rangers drop off from line 2, and I'm saying that's their best line because it is Panarin, Lafreniere, Trocheck, to Zibanejad, Kreider, whoever, to Cooley, Kakko, now Wenberg, to Gaudreau, Rempe, Edstrom is enormous. Your goal as a team that wants to go on a long playoff run that isn't overwhelmingly talented, the Rangers are a talented team, but there are a lot of teams that are going to be in the playoffs whose high-end players are better. And that's not a knock on Zibanejad, Panarin, Trocheck, whomstever. They're good. You would take Austin Matthews over any of those guys. You would probably take Mitch Marner over any of those guys. You would take Sasha Barkov over any of those guys. You would probably take Matthew Tkachuk over any of those guys. As far as the East, at least. Then when you go out West, man, the thing about those teams out West, especially we talk about teams like the Stars top 9 is already great. And they're still going to add guys that back end. And they called up Stankoven, who's been awesome the week and a half he's been on the team. That's the thing, man. These teams out west, they have the high end guys. And I know as we get more familiar, as the Stars get onto a bigger profile, more people are going to be aware of Jason Robertson, of Rupe Hintz. People don't understand how good those guys are, man. Rupe Hintz is awesome. One of the true analytics darlings of the sport. And he's awesome to watch. He's so creative. And then we move along. You talk about Winnipeg. And Winnipeg's high end guys, I'm taking the Rangers high end guys over them for sure. I love Nick Ehlers. He's one of my favorite players in the entire league to watch. We talk about Josh Morrissey. You're going to take Fox over him. Hellebuck's having a better season than Shesterkin right now. That's really the only player with the Jets. But then we talk about Vegas. You're taking Eichel. You're taking a healthy Mark Stone. We're going to talk about Edmonton. You're taking McDavid and Draisaitl. Vancouver, are you taking Pettersson? Are you taking Quinn Hughes? It's a conversation. It's a conversation. And that's the thing. That's why the Rangers shoring up their depth is so important and why they can't have a fourth line that only plays 7-8 minutes a game. It's just really, it is a risky proposition to have those guys only playing 7-8 minutes a game. And they can't do that long term sustainably. They just can't. And I like what their third line brings. I'm very excited to see what Wenberg does. I think Wenberg is a clear upgrade over what they've been doing in that spot. He's going to make the lineup better because that's going to bump Brodzinski down to the fourth line. It's going to bump Gaudreau out to the wing in an ideal world. And then you add a forward. You can bump VZ down there. And that fourth line of Brodzinski, Gaudreau, and VZ, that's decent. You feel pretty good about that. That's something to be optimistic about as far as fourth lines go. But if the first line is going to be this much of a struggle, some Tarots, I'm not sure how to pronounce your screen name, but you said Osman call up. I think if they were going to do Osman, he would have been on the team already. And that's why I felt reasonably okay with trading him for the right guy this deadline, was if they felt he was close, he would have been on the team as a trial run over the last few weeks between the deadline and the Blake Wheeler injury, because they needed someone. They genuinely needed someone, but instead they opted for Kakko and Rempe and Edstrom. So I think if Othman were the guy, or if I think Othman were NHL ready, he would be here. I still don't know what he is. I personally feel Rempe, excuse me. I personally feel Othman is probably peak a second liner, 20, 25 goals, maybe 45, 50 points, depending on power play usage, which is good. Don't get me wrong. But that's not the type of guy you hold on to if it's the difference between getting Gensel and Buchnevich. I, for one, Buchnevich was always the pipe dream. My feelings on Buchnevich are well known. I don't think Drury particularly cared for the player, and that's ultimately why he was traded for basically nothing. I'm more inclined, excuse me, as I look for my water here. Yes, I brought 2-gallon jugs of water up here for 2 hours because I wasn't sure how much water I was going to need to drink over this period of time. But, excuse me, 1 second. The reason I subscribe to the theory Drury didn't like Buchnevich as opposed to the Eichel trade, they could have kept Buchnevich till the deadline of 21-22. They could have gotten better than Sammy Blais and a second round pick at the deadline that year. Come on now. Buchnevich, I understand, is a polarizing figure. I understand that the American hockey guys, I shouldn't say American, the hockey men in general are skeptical of the Europeans. I really do understand that. I know that's been an issue in the Rangers organization, the way certain prospects were prioritized over others. I mean, the textbook example was Jimmy Vesey and Buchnevich were rookies the same season, and Jimmy Vesey was getting more ice time, even though Buchnevich was and is the better player. So I understand the skepticism, and as we move into the home stretch here, what time is it? We got about 40 minutes to go. And then, the 10-ish minutes of overlap where trades that are in the log that are getting processed come in, they trickle in, 301, 302, 310. Like, if I remember correctly, the Ryan McDonough, JT Miller trade didn't get processed till like 310, 315. God, that was a stressful day. I remember I skipped class that day. I was a sophomore, junior in college. I forget. I laid in my bed all day, just whoop, boop, on Twitter, refreshing Twitter, incessantly trying to see what was up. And they got the box of magic beans from a team that knows better. I've talked about it a lot, whether it's here on Liberty Blue, whether it's on Locked On Flames, whether it's on Locked On NHL with Hunter Hodes, where we do the power rankings every Thursday. Whether it's there, whether it's here, the mystery box could be anything. It could be Ryan McDonough. It could be JT Miller. And they genuinely thought they were getting something in Hayek and Lieber Hayek and Brett Howden. Howden has turned into a useful player for Vegas. I do think some of that is that the Rangers just genuinely have no idea what they're doing when it comes to talent evaluation and talent development. But Howden was genuinely the worst player in the entire NHL 2 of the 3 seasons he was on the Rangers. Hang on. I got to pull it up because I'm curious. I just want to see what Evolving Wild player pages. Wait. Brett Howden. And I will screen share this because this is one of my favorite things to do. And I understand a lot of people are skeptical of the analytics community and the value because they don't understand a whole lot of inputs. But just for the purposes of comedy here, I understand some people might not find this amusing, but I think it's hilarious personally. It's this one. Yes. Okay. So this is Evolving Wild, a very good subscription service. I highly encourage if you are curious about statistics. They are worth the $5 a month to get more statistics. If you are looking here, this is standing points above replacement. So if you're a baseball person, wins above replacement is comparing what a AAA call up would be. So if you're looking at this value column, if you translate what a player's production gives the team. So if you're looking here, offense, defense, penalties, and then standing points above replacement, Brad Howden should have paid the Rangers $5.1 million his rookie season. That's how bad Brett Howden was as a rookie. I am not exaggerating when I say there's a real strong case Brett Howden was the worst player in the entire NHL as a rookie. That's how bad he was. And the Rangers gave him away. Excuse me, the Rangers coveted him and gave away JT Miller as the throw-in to get him and Hayek. So Sarah in the chat says, Kevin Weeks said Olmark killed a trade the Bruins had regarding him. NHL Bruins thought they had something with Olmark, so there was a deal that was nixed, in large part based on geography. So if it's based on geography, is that the Kings? Is that the Kings? I know the Kings need a goalie. The Cam Talbot, David Rittich experiment held up reasonably well through December, and it was working for a while. And I know the Kings are kind of up and down. They don't have a ton of high-end talent. Quinton Byfield looks like a guy, or at least is developing into one. Anytime I see Dmitry Filipovich tweet a Quinton Byfield highlight at like 11:45 on a weeknight, I know I'm about to see some crazy shit, and he's turning into a guy. Emily Kaplan says on the point that Ducks GM Pat Verbeek has a high price point for Vetrano, and it seems unlikely Rangers will acquire him prior to today's 3 p.m. deadline. I'm fine with that. I go back and forth on Vetrano. I know a lot of people have the tinge of 2021-22 in their minds, and don't get me wrong, for a 4th-round pick, Vetrano was a steal. A lot of people forget Vetrano was getting healthy scratched on that Panthers team that season, and that's part of why he was so cheap. Now, made an all-star team. I want to say he has 30-something goals, if I remember correctly right now. He has 29. So Vetrano's a good player. Elliot Friedman, where'd that notification go? Excuse me here as I refresh Twitter. Oh, no, it's the same notification as before. Oh, well. But as far as what they need to do, still 40 minutes, and then that 10 minutes of overlap at the end where trades that are backed up can get processed. Chris Drury, I am begging you on all that is holy. Go get me a forward for the love of God. I need it. I need it. I need it. And there's the paper transaction. Rempe and Edstrom sent down to Hartford. That's so they're eligible for the AHL playoffs. That's a good thing. I imagine Rempe and Edstrom may or may not play for the Rangers down the stretch here. I don't know. It really does depend on what they add. The Rempe experience has been interesting. The Rangers have been winning. The players on the team clearly value him being around, and they've won a good chunk of the game since he's gotten calling up. Whether or not he's a functional player, that remains to be seen. But I'm not ignorant of the fact that there are components of hockey that aren't going to be able to be quantified. I go back and forth on this. Carlo Carlovacchio, who's on TSN, said something along the lines of, well, the Leafs are adding these guys because spreadsheets don't and pie charts don't win playoff games. I am not ignorant of the fact that that physicality, that intensity, that grit, as we like to joke, that matters to the guys on the team. As far as winning the actual game, that's debatable. The impact of that is limited. But if the guys on the team feel like it's going to help them, I'm not going to be able to change their mind as far as what it does for them. That's how they feel. Those are their emotions. That's anecdotal evidence, as we like to say in the business. That's not statistical evidence. I understand that they feel that way, and I'm going to take another sip of water here, so hang on as I finish this thought. I understand the anecdotal evidence that those guys value that a whole lot. The value of that is not lost on me. If Rempe or Edstrom or both stay up past the deadline or come back up, because it's a paper transaction, if they come back up and they play down the stretch, that tells me they didn't succeed in their goal for the deadline, at least. Because if those guys were dependable, if the organization felt like they could trust them, they'd be playing more than they are right now. C. Bernhard 97. No matter who they add, they need to add somebody. It's on Mika, Panarin, Fox, Igor to show up in big moments, take this team to the promised land. Amen, brother. I've been saying that for quite a few weeks now. The capability of making something happen is here. They haven't had a functional first line basically all season. Their bottom six gives them no offense. They have one good defensive pair. Up until mid-February, their goaltending was awful. And they're still in the mix for best record in the entire league. That's why you have to take a shot. It's not that I feel overwhelmingly great about the group itself. It's that the potential is there. If Igor leans forward in his chair, like you're down in FIFA in the second half, there's not a lot of guys in the world, if any, I'm taking over that guy. If you look over at, is it Benajed, Kreider? My brothers, I need you to lock the fuck in. I beg of you. We're going to get you some help. At least I hope. If the Rangers don't add anyone, then I think we have a real conversation about getting the pitchforks and torches out. But if they still got time, they still got time. That was my take last night when I saw a lot of people starting to mystify condition. If Jake Allen plays 40 or more games between this season and next, the Devils' third-round pick will become a second. Okay. So that tells me the Devils probably won't add, whether it be Olmark or Markstrom in the summer, which, again, and I talked about this yesterday, actually. I was talking about this with Annie on our on the conversation we did about the Ducks, that when you try and recreate goaltending in the aggregate, when you try and I'm smirking to myself over at the chat. Daniel says, I think it's patches for cheaper. They do nothing. That's probably where we're at. And then Migsy 1974 script was leaked. Vancouver, New York, Stanley Cup final 2024, 30 years anniversary, but we win this year. I like the Canucks team. I do. It's just the West is going to be such a bloodbath. I don't feel great about picking any of those teams coming out of the West. So, God bless. I hope it happens. But back to the Rangers. So, Daniel, if you'd be so kind to, if you could copy and paste the Larry Brooks tweet in the chat for me, because Larry blocked me because I asked him why he asked questions in his column, that'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you. So, if we're talking about what they need to do, we're going to need the best players on this team to play like it. Panarin, Trocheck, Fox, y'all been doing your job. Shesterkin has been rounding into form. No deal is far better than making a bad trade. If the Rangers are unable to get what they want, there is no need to bring up an extra forward who will gum up the works. 20 games left to work with Edstrom and or Rempe. 20 games for Cooley to take a larger role. See, my counterpoint to that is, so we're going to go into the playoffs with first line Jimmy Vesey, and thank you, Daniel, for going to get the tweet for the chat. I appreciate it. Can I pin that? Yeah, there we go. That's from Daniel. This is the latest Larry Brooks tweet. If you don't want to go between the two, that's the thing. I really, oh God, Jake Ensel, professional word of advice. Jake Ensel is on the point right now. Professional word of advice. If you ever have to do a media hit, or if you ever record a Skype interview, do not record with windows behind you. It makes the lighting look bad, and it makes it harder for the person that's editing the video to color correct. Okay. Word of advice, Jake Gensel. Your lighting's not terrible, Jake Gensel. You probably should get yourself a ring light. I don't know if you're on the if you're on TikTok, but buy yourself the $9 Alex Earl ring light. It's a good investment. The battery dies quick, but I'm well lit and you can see my face, unfortunately. So if we're talking about this team, the story of this team, ultimately, it starts with the goalie. That's where, as a Ranger fan, you feel good. Shesterkin, when he's locked in, there's basically no one else. Fox, one of the 5 best defensemen in the world, already won a Norris Trophy. Panarin, Hart Trophy guy. Hart Trophy candidate, I should say. He hasn't won a Hart Trophy, but Hart Trophy candidate. Former first and second overall picks. 2 forwards in Trocheck and Zibanejad, who are going to be close to, if not point per game players. Chris Kreider, who has scored 40 goals twice now. That is a good start. The issue, and I referred to this earlier, and if you're just joining us, where I was talking about the conversation Andrew and I had earlier in the week with Matt Albert, who's a gambling guy who worked with a couple different books and odds makers, that type of thing. When we've talked about them, when we talked about the Rangers, the idea is not to have that much of a drop off the further you go down your lineup. And when you think about it, Panarin, Trocheck, Lafreniere down to Zibanejad, Kreider, and Humstever, there's a drop off there, especially at 5-on-5. You drop off next tier down, that is a really big drop off. Sarah, if you could be so kind, I know I see you copy and pasted the week's tweet in there. The chat doesn't populate what the tweet is, and if I click on the chat, it doesn't let me click on the link. So hang on, let me see if it'll let me do that. Yeah, if you could be so kind and copy and paste whatever that Kevin Weeks tweet is, because I see you said "oh come on" underneath it, so I'm a little scared. I'm gonna click over to Twitter real quick just to see if I can see what you are talking about. No, I don't see any new insider updates, but Jake Allen to the Devils, Jake Gensel, blah 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 blah. Oh, that's a funny shit post. But as far as getting the idea of the drop off, that drop off in terms of production, not talent. The third line of Brodzinski, Kakko, and Cooley, excuse me, has been good. It's not great. They don't contribute a ton of offense, but they dump the puck in, they burn clock, they make the other team play defense. That's a third line with some upside. If Will Cooley keeps playing like this, he is going to be probably a 20-goal guy at his peak. I think with the right line mates, the right environment, he's probably never going to get power play 1 time. If the power play 2 ever gets taken seriously, maybe 25, but Cooley's a good player. He has given me a lot more than I expected. I expected Will Cooley to be stapled to the 4th line this season, and he's done a lot more than that. But the drop off, man, in production from line 1 to line 2 to line 3 to line 4, it's serious. And I know we have Wenberg in the mix now, but Wenberg's not a huge chance creator. He's not a play driver. He's a solid supplementary piece. I'm not mad they added Wenberg. The cost wasn't ridiculous. He's a useful player. He's better than what they had. Brodzinski's better than the fourth line, better than what they have currently on the fourth line. And that's really the case. Blah, blah, blah. The point says, okay, that's the Kevin Weeks update. Yeah, no, one of my friends says maybe Edmonton was the idea for Olmark. Jacob Zaboral for Peaks. Okay. As far as the last 30 minutes, Larry Brooks getting the narrative control out there that the wrong trade is better than that no trade is better than the wrong trade. That makes me very nervous. If we go into the playoffs with Jimmy Vesey first line right wing, no one's going to feel particularly good about that. And that's not a knock on Jimmy Vesey, who has resurrected his career with the Rangers. When the Rangers signed him 2 years ago, I genuinely thought they were doing someone a favor. I thought Jimmy Vesey was on his way out of the league. He couldn't stick on a Devils team that was god-awful. 2 years ago, Jimmy Vesey was playing, I want to say, third line minutes on a god-awful Devils team. An absolutely god-awful Devils team. Where are they? 14.25 per game on a god-awful Devils team, and he was not doing a whole lot there. As far as going from... Lost my train of thought, excuse me. I'm focusing on like 9 different things at once, and my brain is starting to catch up with me, being that all I've had to eat today was a muffin and 2 iced coffees. But we will persist. I will have another coffee after we're done with this live stream. And thank you to everybody who is stopping by. I do appreciate the lively chat is nice. It's great when we're able to come together as a hockey community. Days like this are what makes it fun. I always talk to people who are like, why are you so into hockey? And I always tell them, it's the community, man. The people in the hockey community, I can't count how many good friends I've made through hockey, in all honesty. And everybody who's hanging out today, I appreciate it. It's not like anyone's getting work done today anyway, but I'm glad you guys are here. Home stretch now. 20 minutes to go. My prediction, it's either Pacioretty or nothing. Maybe there's a trade out of right field. I know that's been a common theme amongst Ranger fans, is speculating on maybe they make Tuck happen. Maybe they make like something absurd like Clayton Keller happen. Mark Sullivan, if Kakko in first wasn't offered for Gensel, then Drury didn't do enough. They value Kakko too high. He fits on the third line and he could have been replaced easily for a $2 million player. Mark, I agree with you. I was having this conversation with somebody yesterday, one of my Penguins fan friends, who said, what would your offer be for Gensel? And I said, I would give you a first round pick. You could choose between this year and next year, whichever one you prefer. Kakko, and I was ready to do Othman. I was ready to do a first Kakko and Othman for Gensel. I wouldn't have felt great about it, but Gensel is genuinely that impactful of a player. I really would have done that. C. Bernhard 97, Dumba to Tampa. That fits. Dumba at this point, he's a reputation guy. He's not particularly good anymore. He's not great, but maybe they can make something happen. Mike Baccio says, if they don't make a move, Kakko on line 1. Yeah, you're probably right, in all honesty. They probably do that and hope for the regression to come back around. That's actually a good point, Mike. I can show you guys something interesting about that line if we can get Natural Stat Trick to load relatively quickly. So we're going to go to Players, Line Tool. Here, I'll screen share with you if you're curious how I do this type of stuff. So screen share, Natural Stat Trick line. So Natural Stat Trick's a really useful database. So you go Players, Line Tool, and this brings up this. All you got to do is set the parameters. So Rangers, with or without, submit. We're going to go, where is Chris Kreider, Mika Zibanejad, and then Capo Kakko. Excuse me, my brain is tired. Submit. This is just this season. So in 216 minutes, which is a decent sample size, 52% of the scoring chances, 71% of the goals, 51% of the expected goals, 59% of the high danger chances. Yes, I rounded up to 0.3. This is the issue here. I'll highlight it because I don't know if my cursor pops up, but on ice shooting percentage. So all of the scoring chances when Kreider, Zibanejad, Kakko, and the defenseman. This counts every single defenseman. It's not a specific pair, whatever. Every single person who's taken a scoring chance with those three, they've only put the puck in the net 5.49% of the time. And then if we take Kakko away and we do it with just Kreider and Zibanejad, that on ice shooting percentage jumps up to 9%. And that tells you that Kakko's inability to put the puck in the net is a real issue for them. Justin with the James Gandolfini holding the Yankee hat. Tell me everything will be okay. If you want my elevator pitch, if they don't add anything as to why everything will be okay, Igor. You got Igor, you got Adam Fox. That's 2 of the 20 best players in the entire world. That'll get you in the conversation. It's not the most reassuring thing. Florida's 2 best guys. I mean, you would rather have your best players be forwards because forwards play more. Forwards impact the game more. They're more likely to lead to offense. They're more likely to put the puck in the net. And it's hard to win when your best player is a defenseman. I mean, if we look through recent NHL history here, I'll pull it up on a second and we can screen share players, seasons, all NHL seasons. So if we pull this up, and I'll screen share for the purposes of this conversation, League Index, Hockey Reference. Okay, so Vegas, Florida. The goalie was not the best player on either of those teams. On Vegas, it's probably Jack Eichel, even though, other guys probably had better postseasons. It's probably Eichel. On Florida, it's Barkov. And then we go 2 years ago. Colorado, your choice if you want to say Makar or McKinnon. I wouldn't argue either way. Tampa, Vasilevsky is probably their best player overall, but 2 years ago, if you wanted to say here, and we'll go sidebar here. 2 years ago, if you wanted to say it was Hedman or Kucherov or Stamkos even, who had 100 points, sure. 2021, I think there's a real argument it's Hedman or Vasilevsky. 1920, real argument it was Vasilevsky or Hedman. And then 2019, probably Petrangelo's the Blues' best player, the Bruins' best player, Bergeron, Washington's best player, Ovechkin, Vegas's best player, Bill Carlson, Wild Bill, then Pittsburgh, Sid, San Jose. That's a good question. Who was the best player on that Sharks team? Was it Pavelski, Jumbo? Jumbo, 82 points in 82 games. That's not bad as a 36-year-old, But when you're looking down this list, historically speaking at least, your best players are generally forwards if you're going to win the Stanley Cup. I'm not saying it's impossible. It is just a lot more difficult if your best player is a goalie. As Henrik Lundqvist, who, God bless him, my favorite hockey player ever. Those are only 2 of the 4 Henrik Lundqvist jerseys I own. One of the nicest athletes I've ever met. The poor guy couldn't put the puck in the net too. You could only ask him to do so much, and the guy did everything he could. I'm going to pull up his playoff stats here just as an aside, because he did everything he could. He did absolutely everything you could. Oh, wait, no, that's the wrong tab. Excuse me. Share screen, Henrik Lundqvist. And we look at it here. His career averages in the playoffs, 921 save, 2.3 goals against average. We are talking about one of the best we have ever seen in the postseason. I love the guy to death. The poor guy couldn't do it by himself. Who was the best player prime Henrik Lundqvist ever played with? Marian Gabourik's 40-goal season? Marian Gabourik's 40-goal season, Rick Nash's 40-goal season. I love Rick Nash. I own a Rick Nash. I own 2 Rick Nash jerseys. I own a Marian Gaborik jersey. Neither of those guys is of the caliber of a Stamkos, of a Point, of a Kucherov, of an Eichel. They're just not. And of a McKinnon. I like those. Mark, I see you saying Jágr, but I don't think Lundqvist was quite ready yet. I agree with you. Jágr is probably the best player Lundqvist played with, because they had pretty close to peak Jágr. Even though you could probably argue Jágr with Pittsburgh was a lot more dominant, Jágr was probably the best player. Or Jágr then, in that 05-06 season where he set the Rangers record, or Panarin 4 years ago, or Panarin right now. Probably the best players Lundqvist has ever played with. Excuse me. I'm going to take another sip of water here. We are in the home stretch. 14 minutes to go. If you are in the chat and want to drop, give me your guess. What do you think happens? Is it Pacioretty? Is it Riley Smith? Is it a nothing? Are the Rangers going to stand pat, and is Drury going to try and have his cake and eat it too? Oh, one of the trades I didn't bring up that I found interesting today, that is interesting for a few reasons. Barry Trotz going out and adding Jason Zucker. The Predators canceling their U2 concert at the Sphere, their group outing to the Sphere, kind of swung their season. They were in that lull. They had lost a couple games in a row. They weren't playing particularly well. And then they went like 7-3-0 for a stretch, and they went and added Tori. See you say, I'm guessing nothing happens. Yeah, I really hope it's not that. If that's the case, then objectively, I don't think it happens. Mark says, I want Tuck, but I have a feeling it will be Frankie the Rifle Vetrano. Vetrano's price point worries me, but he would be better than what they currently have. And the Rangers are not in a position to be biding their time. Their core is getting old. Their best players are good. Other teams are great. And the fall offs, C Bernhard 97, we're buying Claudno and signing Yager. Yager would be great, man. Prime Yager would be great. If I tweeted it a few weeks ago when one of those engagement farm accounts tweeted, who would you add to your current team if you were trying to win the Stanley Cup? It's Prime Yager. You add 05-06 Yager to Zibanejad and Kreider, they either figure it out or he forces them off the team. One of the two. And either way, the Rangers win, which is a good place to be. So, home stretch. I really need a forward, Chris. I promise, if we don't mess this up, Chris, if you go out and get a good forward, I will stop making Pizza Boy jokes. I promise. We're an hour and 40 minutes in, 1,400 people watching the stream right now. Every single one of you, thank you, appreciate you. Sarah says the Penguins have acquired goaltender Ludovic Weber and a conditional 7th round pick for Magnus Hellberg. Rangers legend Magnus Hellberg. I want to say Hellberg might be the worst player I've ever seen play goalie for the Rangers, if I remember correctly. Yeah, he made 2 appearances for the Rangers. 4, excuse me. It's hard to count. 4 appearances for the Rangers. As a 22-year-old, he faced 4 shots and saved 3 of them. As a 24-year-old, he faced 6 and he faced 6 and he gave up 2. You never want to be in the 7 or 600s when it comes to save percentage. Sarah says, breaking, Patches say staying in Washington. Oh God, it's Riley Smith or Frank Vetrano or nothing. We're in trouble, chat. I'm worried. I tweeted at like 2 a.m. last night. Yes, I would have liked Jake Gensel, but there are a lot of good players out there. I'm not worried yet. With 11 minutes to go, I'm worried. I am very, very, very worried that the Rangers are not going to add anyone. Oh God, I'm so stressed out right now. This is not great. I'm not going to lie to you. Chris, if you can hear me, brother, I will stop referring to you as Pizza Boy. I will stop making Colony Pizza jokes. Please, my brother in Christ, make something happen for the love of God. I can't go into the playoffs with this lineup as it is currently. Julia says, weeping. It's going to be a Bucci surprise. They trade for Buchnevich. I'm going to have to think of something ridiculous to do. What? I don't know. I'll have to collaborate with a few people and talk and see what I can make happen, but I'll see what I can do if they pull Buchnevich out of their ass. But I don't think Buchnevich is going to happen. It's really unfortunate. I really wish we could. I wish we could. He's genuinely the best line mate Zibanejad and Kreider have ever had. Hang on. I want to show you guys something as far as Buchnevich. Oh, that's right. I got to refresh. Hang on. We're going over to Natural Stat Trick. So this is the line tools of Zibanejad, Kreider, and then The man, the myth, the Magnet King himself, Pavel Buchnevich. I also miss the way Joe Tolleson used to say Buchnevich's name during lineup announcements. I know that's kind of a niche thing, but this is Zibanejad, Kreider, Buchnevich over the 3-year period of 2018 to 2021. So scoring chances under evens. Goals 63%, expected goals 51%, high danger under 49, and then shooting percentage 10. The thing about Buchnevich that made him so valuable to those guys was his ability of a puck carrier. Ooh, Jack Roslovich. Okay, Chris, that's somebody I identified and I liked. I am very happy with that. That is somebody I really wanted to add. In fact, I was texting with someone earlier. There we go. I am texting Roslovic. I like it. That is somebody I put on my list like a month ago when I tweeted out a graphic. And I want to thank everybody who dropped into the chat to drop the news. It's greatly appreciated. Roslovic, I like the fit. Let's go under the hood and let's talk about what Jack Roslovic looks like. So, oh, that's right. I'm going to have to hang on. I got to refresh this page, screen share, player cards. So, we're going to go. Why is Roslovic not populating? Hang on. Has he not played enough games this year? Hang on, chat. I know this is not great radio. This is peak Mike Francesa thumbing through the box scores, but 40 games should be enough. But we'll go to last year just for argument's sake. 22, 20. No, I don't want playoffs. The Blue Jackets definitely did not make the playoffs last year. Jack Ross. Why is it doing this? Hang on. Player cards. There we go. Okay. Jack Roslovic. This is the type of player card you really want to see for Zibanejad and Kreider. Okay. So Sarah says, update on Vegas thing. Vegas have been making traction towards another big move for a player with term. We'll see if they can get this to the finish line. Buchnevich, maybe? Vegas getting Buchnevich would be crazy. But back to Roslovic here. Looking at his transition stats, this is a good sign. So this is 2 years ago, obviously. He hasn't played enough games to have a stat card this season, but 2 years ago, zone entries, above average. Controlled entries, above average. Controlled entries per 60, entries off of a pass, entries with chance, entries with a pass. All of those are above average. Zibanejad and Kreider need that type of player so damn badly because those guys are not great in transition. Hopefully, we got to see what the return is, what the Rangers are giving up for Roslovic. Hopefully, it's not a ton. I like Roslovic as a player, but if I remember correctly, he's an expiring contract, which is why I had identified him as a potential fit. Yeah, he is. He makes $4 million. I think with what Seattle retained on Wenberg, they should be able to make that work. Not too crazy, needing anyone to retain anything. 5 minutes to go. Anything else? Mark Roslovic puts up middle six numbers. Yes, he does. He definitely does put up middle six numbers. I'll pull up his hockey reference right now. Hang on. Jack Roslovic. So I will walk you guys through this because I'll walk you through how my process goes with this type of stuff. So generally, I like to start with the zone stuff, the stuff I had showed you before, the stuff about zone entries, transition, that type of stuff, because that tells me how much a player impacts on their own. And counting stats are not the best indicator of how good a player is. So you look at it, 24 and 77, 29 and 71, 34 and 48, 45 and 80, 44 and 77. I agree. Those are not jump off the page numbers. Those are not wow me numbers. But the thing about a player who can drive possession like that, and Sarah, I see you saying Oilers are done, deadline complete. Okay, so that's not terrible. The Oilers, I think they probably should have added one more guy, but we will see. So we'll go over to Jack Roslovic's player card. This is Jacob Slavens. We don't want that. We want Roslovic. So you're going to see that. That's 1 year. That's this season. And we'll look at his 3-year average. So you see the offense there, the defense there. So the pros and cons of a player like this. The pros, the under the hood stuff, the transition numbers are great. That is something, a 4th-round pick that becomes a 3rd. That's good. That's great. Roslovic for a 4th that becomes a 3rd if they make the final. And thank you, Sarah, for dropping the details. That's great. They didn't give up a lot. And they got a player who fills a very specific need. Kreider and Zibanejad need a puck carrier for them to facilitate offense. They need somebody who's going to get the puck to the offensive zone for them, and they can create off of that. Whether or not Roslovic jumps off the page, no. But his skill set works for me. That is something I feel good about. Oh, God, I see holy shit in the chat. Hurdle? Tomas Hurdle to Vegas? Oh my goodness. Yeah, nah, Kelly McCrimmon, many men. Oh my goodness. Yeah, Kelly McCrimmon's the best general manager in hockey. My goodness, I gotta see. I don't know what they got him for, obviously. I don't know when Hurdle's supposed to be back. I thought he suffered a major lower body injury, if I remember correctly. Loose cartilage, several weeks, and that was February 12th. It's been a month. Hurdle could probably play for them by the playoffs, which, Vegas knows what they're doing, man. Oh my goodness, that team is loaded. You talk about Eichel and Howden and Barbashev and Hurdle and Petrangelo and Shea Theodore and Noah Hannafin and Aiden Hill and Mark Stone. That team is sick. When we had Matt Albert on earlier in the week and we were talking about teams that weren't in that elite tier but had the potential, me and him were both in agreement and buying on Vegas, partly because we knew they were going to do something insane. I'm very excited to text Blakey Locks, another friend of the show, who's a gambling guy, who I gave Vegas as my, if you weren't going to bet the Oilers, Stars, or Edmonton, who would you bet on? I would bet on them. Zach, just notice in the shirt, real Graps. Yeah, no. After Forbidden Door last year, I had to buy the shirt, man. Okada, Danielson, and then Ospreay and Kenny Omega. Ospreay Omega 2 is probably the best wrestling match I've ever seen. I can't believe Will Ospreay's all elite. We're fed every single Wednesday. His match with Fletcher on Wednesday was awesome. But back to hockey for all the people who were here for actually that. But that trade for Vegas is fucking nuts. Tomash, I should say it correctly. When I know how to pronounce a guy's name phonetically, native to their language, I do try. And I know Hurdle, his numbers aren't crazy, but that's a good hockey player. And you're adding him to a team that's already loaded. I feel okay. So somebody replied on Twitter, Zeno doubt, Evan Zeno. I give up on how useless our GM is. Put Trouba on LTIR and go do anything creative for once in your life. He blew up our team in our first summer and stands pat when he deemed this season winner bust. I don't know if the Rangers were going to able to feasibly do that. On a pronunciation note, Roe Pay Hints. Okay, thank you, Julia. I appreciate that. Jets made another trade with Devils. Interesting. Okay. But as far as the Rangers and LTIR, we don't know what the deal is with Trouba. I know it was reported he was getting evaluated. I forget if Laviolette said that or if it was I forget if it was Laviolette who said that or if someone reported that during the week. But the NHL does check these guys. I know there's a lot of jokes about LTIR. Oh, we hit 3:00. We're good. Thank you. Appreciate that, Sarah, for saying that. I also didn't know. So I'll go another 5-10 minutes because I need to eat. I am starving. I need to use the bathroom. And I need to actually get some notes together to go do Locked on Flames in a little bit. But everybody who swung by today, greatly appreciate you. You guys are why we do this. Andrew regrets he wasn't able to make it because work is work. This is a side hustle. We do this for fun because we love doing this genuinely. So final notes for the Rangers. Roslovic and Wenberg are guys I had identified as potential candidates. I want to say I tweeted that probably early February. I'll see if I can find the graphic I had made on Twitter where I threw them Wenberg in there. There are a lot of guys that would have fit the bill this summer, this deadline. Okay, the Rangers are not in an awful position. I like the guys they added. I like. I really like the Roslovic ad for one reason and one reason only. That's generally not the type of guy the Rangers look at. We lament how much I at least, how I didn't see the fit for Patrick Kane, that they were kind of looking for something. They wanted him to be something he wasn't. They really wanted him to be a difference maker, the type of player who could swing a series. And that's just not who Patrick Kane is anymore. He's had a solid season in Detroit. That's not taking away from him. But last year, he wasn't what the Rangers needed. The Rangers needed more well-rounded two-way play to support. They weren't great defensively last year. I still don't feel that the Rangers are a very strong defensive team. Better 5-on-5 than last year, but still not great. And we hit the 1,600 mark. That's the most we've ever had on a stream. So everybody who's here, greatly, greatly appreciate you. If you've been in the chat throughout the course of the stream and you've dropped in news, questions, greatly appreciated. The community part is why this is fun. Watching this with everybody else is why this is fun, man. Everybody loves the trade deadline. It is extremely exciting because everybody feels like they're good about this. Oh man, the Vegas hate is going to get insane. Vegas is a great team. And I know we're going to see a lot of LTIR discourse, and I talked about this on both of the podcasts I recorded yesterday. If the owners didn't want this in there, it wouldn't be. They would have a salary cap in the playoffs, or there would be rules about how you use LTIR. The owners want this there because if the opportunity strikes for them, they want their team to be able to do this too. If the Rangers knew, let me put this caveat on this, and I can wrap up on this note. If the Rangers know Trouba is going to be out more than a week or two, not putting him on LTIR is negligence of the highest magnitude. Kind of like what happened with Lindgren last year. If the Rangers know Trouba's not ready to go for at least a few weeks, really, really bad look to not be using LTIR like Vegas, who added 2 elite players. Okay, I shouldn't say elite. 2 good players. I really like Noah Hannafin. I know other people aren't as bullish on him as I am, but I've watched a lot of him over the years in Calgary, and I think in Vegas he's going to do a really nice job, whether they play him with Pietrangelo or bump him down the lineup. And Hertl as a 2C, as a 3C, that's a great player. I really want to see what Vegas gave up to get Tomas Hertl, because they don't have a ton of assets, first rounders going back to San Jose. Okay. Again, Vegas's draft picks don't matter, much like the Rangers draft picks don't matter, but it seems like Drury kind of wants to have it both ways. And maybe I'll go live later tonight. I will see how my evening goes. Okay. I still have to record Locked On Flames. I have to go to the gym. I would like to watch SmackDown because The Rock and Roman Reigns are supposed to be there. If I can get on later tonight, I will attempt to go live and we can talk a little bit more about Drury and stuff. Oh, and exciting news. I know we got 1,600 people in here. If you are free tomorrow afternoon, this is very exciting for us on the show here. We've had some good guests over the last few weeks. We've had the legend himself, Sam Rosen, on a couple of times. This weekend, tomorrow, 1 o'clock. I think we confirmed 1 o'clock. Hang on. Let me pull up my phone here and confirm the time. Where is Andrew? Andrew was able to confirm this. So tomorrow, 1 p.m., Saturday, March 9th, Molly Walker of the New York Post will be joining Andrew and I. We will be talking with Molly all about the Rangers deadline, what they're going to look like down the stretch. Very happy Molly was able to make some time for us tomorrow. Anytime we are able to get people who know what they're doing, like Molly, like Sam, or any of the people we've had on for a Liberty Blue conversation in the last few weeks, it makes the show better. It's why I love having guests who can provide variety of perspectives, because I understand there are limitations to my perspectives, that I know how to do analysis of a player in a very specific way, but other people look at the game in a different way, and that's part of what makes hockey compelling. Okay, I am going to die if I don't go to the bathroom in the next 2 minutes, so I'm going to end on that note. Everybody who stopped by the stream today, from the bottom of Andrew and I's heart, thank you. Make sure you can swing by tomorrow Join the conversation. If you're around and you watch us live tomorrow with Molly, the chat will be open. If you want to get questions in, we will do our best to get those. We will be conscious of her time. It is a Rangers game day tomorrow. Thank you for everybody who stopped by. Andrew and I will see you with Molly of the New York Post, Molly Walker of the New York Post tomorrow. That'll go live as a stream like this and wherever you get your podcast. So if you're not around tomorrow afternoon, you will have an opportunity to listen after the fact. I'll see you guys real soon.